We are in this series called Living a Full Life, and we are looking at Psalm chapter 65, and we'll start in verse 5. By awesome deeds you answer us with righteousness, O God of our salvation, the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the farthest seas. If you take notes, if you underline things, or if you have your phone and you highlight things, look at that part, the hope of all the ends of the earth and of the furthest seas. The one who by his strength established the mountains, being girded with might, who stills the roaring of the seas, the roaring of their waves as the tumult of the people, so that those who dwell at the ends of the earth are in awe at your signs. You make the going out of the morning and the evening to shout for joy. You visit the earth and you water it. You greatly enrich it. The river of God is full of water. You provide their grain, for so you have prepared it. You water its furrows abundantly, settling its ridges, softening it with showers, and blessing its growth. You crown the year with your bounty. Your wagon tracks overflow with abundance. The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy. The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and they sing together for joy. Last week, we kind of looked at living an impactful life. And we talked about how if you want to live an impactful life, you need stability. And this week, I'm making like week 2 of living an impactful life by talking about this idea of hope. And how if we want to live an impactful life, we need to live a hopeful life. Because without hope, who are we? What are we? David said in Psalm 42:11, "Why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me?" Then he said, "Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God." David's Psalms, I think, are beautiful to read. They're really fun to read. They burst full of hope. They burst full of joy. They burst full of life. And I think it's easy when we read these Psalms to forget some of the things that David went through. Think about David, the man who wrote that his hope was in the Lord. He starts off at a young age as being recorded as being so attractive that people are like, oh man, look at this guy. And his whole future is right in front of him. One of the first things that happens in his recorded history of his life is a prophet comes to him and is like, you're going to be the next king of Israel. The next time we see David, he's killing someone that no one else can kill. And he's doing it with a rock. And then he chops the head off this violent giant who's trying to destroy everybody. And he kind of hits this like superstardom ascent. If you watched the NBA at all, you saw the draft this week. And there was a man named Victor Wembanyama, who is the most hyped prospect in the history of the NBA. Literally from the time he was 12, he has been better and stronger and faster and more athletic than anyone else around him. This is kind of how David's story begins, right? It's like this story of like, man, you're going to be the king and you're going to be this great warrior and you're fighting these people. And then something really interesting happens. He becomes best friends with the current king's son. He marries the king's daughter. He plays a harp in the king's court, which is like super cool because he's like a fighter who plays a harp. I think that's amazing. But one day he goes to war. And he comes back victorious yet again because he's David and he always wins. And that's what David does. Winning is all he does, you know. He's like the Tim Tebow of battle. And on his way back in through the gates, the singers are waiting outside to celebrate. And they sing this song, and it's one lyric of a song. I mean, how crazy is it that your life can change on one post? One tweet, one conversation, one word, one job. All these singers at the gate, they start singing this song, and it goes like this. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And the king who's supposed to be mentoring him, Saul, hears it. And instead of mentoring him, he decides to pin him to a wall with a spear. And for the next 7 years, David spends his next 7 years, think about it. I get upset if the AC is not right in my house. David spends 7 years in a wilderness hiding from the man who is his father-in-law, who is actively hunting him down to kill him. Now listen, let's put some perspective on it. When someone at work criticizes us, what do we say? Man, I'm just suffering for Jesus. It's persecution because I'm a believer. We say all the stuff. David's father-in-law is trying to kill him, murder him. He's living in caves. In fact, at one point in his life, he has nowhere to go. He has to pretend that he is insane and go live with the enemies. Philistines, the people who Goliath was fighting for in the beginning, he has to go live with them just to survive. And then this story takes this swing back, and now he all of a sudden is back, and he's the king again, and now everything is good. Until his son Absalom decides that he wants to be king and decides to kill him. And what does David have to do again? Go to the wilderness that he was hiding from his father-in-law in. And now his wife hates him. She's out of the picture. His best friend is dead. And his son hunts him to kill him. Yet, David, in his Psalms, keeps repeating this phrase, our hope is in the Lord. My hope is in the Lord. He lives this very hopeful life, which leads him to living a very impactful life. So we have to ask ourselves, I think one of the most important questions, what is our hope in? Because all of us have hope in something or someone. I think we could probably put a list of about 80 things that we place our hopes in here in America, but I've shortened it down to 3 to save time so that I don't preach till tonight. So you're welcome. Happy 4th of July. I think what we place our hope in is either the past, the present, or the future. Here in America, we kind of place our hope in those 3 things. And what we'll do is, if we'll say, those of us who hope in the past, I find myself being very guilty of this. I love to read history, and so I'll say to myself, if we could just go back to where it used to be, things would be fine. We sing the country songs, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days. That's why I haven't made the worship team yet, right there, if you didn't know. We love to hope in the past. If things were just like they were in the 1950s, we'd be great again. We'd be back. But we don't live there anymore. It's not where we live. A lot of us place our hope in, man, this is how I do it. Well, back in the day, though, I could dunk, and boy, I was an athlete then. And our whole entire hope and identity and everything about us is built on how we were in high school. A lot of us place our hope in the past. Some of us place our hope in the present. Looks like this. Well, as long as they keep dating me, I'll be fine. Long as I can stay at my current job, I'll be fine. Long as I have this house, I'll be fine. Long as I've got this situation, I'll be okay. We even do this with the future. Christians just super spiritualize it. Well, when we get to heaven, but we're not there for a reason. God has us here for a reason. God's placed us today for a reason. And it's really easy as Christians to just say, you know what? We just kind of resign and live this martyred lifestyle of like, well, I'm a martyr and no one gets it, no one understands it. And so, well, when we get to heaven, it'll be fine. And it will, and it'll be wonderful. But God has us here at this point in history. He's placed you exactly where he placed you, exactly when he placed you for a reason. So if your hope is only in, well, someday, you're going to be sorely disappointed. All 3 of these lead to a lot of disappointment. If your hope is in the past, you get disappointed when things don't look like the past. If your hope's in the present, you get really disappointed when things don't go your way. Imagine David finding his hope in his present situation. He's living in a cave. There's no toilet paper. I mean, come on. What are you going to do? Yet David's like, my hope is in the Lord. Why? I think that we've placed our hope in the past, the present, or the future, and instead, David placed his hope in God, And his hope in God gave him hope for the past, for the present, and for the future. When we change our hope from our hope is in the past to our hope is in God, he brings us hope for the past. Because when our hope is in God, we understand that God has forgiven us and redeemed us for everything we've done in the past. And now I'm not a sinner because I used to sin. Yeah, we're preaching now. My hope is built on Jesus. And because my hope is built on Jesus, I'm not a failure even if I failed 20 times before. Because Jesus is my hope. So my past is redeemed. It's forgiven. I am not who I used to be. I can raise two hands, right? You can raise one hand and say, thank God you're not who you used to be, right? I saw myself in a picture in middle school. Woo! Thank God I'm not who I used to be. My wife would refer to me as a late bloomer. I looked like Chicken Little in middle school. Thank God I'm not who I used to be. When our hope is in Jesus, he brings us hope for the past. The failures, the pain, the losses, they're gone. You are not who you used to be when your hope is in Jesus. So your past is forgiven, but he also gives you hope for your present. Think about how Jesus works. When you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, gain and access to the throne of God. So that anytime you pray, he can change the situation in a blink of an eye. Anytime you ask him, God, I need help with this, he is a very present help in time of need. He brings hope for your present situation. Oh, you don't know how bad my situation is. No, but I do know how big your God is. And your God is bigger than your present situation. Oh, you don't know how bad I've got it. No, but I know how good God is. You don't know what's going on in my life. I don't, but I know God who reigns over your life. He is a God full of hope. We do not have to abandon hope when we have hope in Jesus. But he also brings us hope for our future. He brings hope for the future, hope for brighter days, hope for better times, hope for those things when they don't go the way we want. So Friday we had a person pass away that we know and that we love. And Saturday I was on my way to a party with Isla, and she's pretty perceptive at this point in her life, and she knew I was kind of having a bad day. And she said, Dad, why are you sad? We're on our way to a party, you know. And I said, I know. I just had a friend who passed away last night. And she said, I'm just going to ask the Holy Spirit if your friend can come back for 3 minutes. Because if your friend comes back for 3 minutes, he'll tell you, hey, I miss you too, but I'm really happy where I'm at. We have hope for the future. You will see your friends and loved ones again. There is a brighter future awaiting when your hope is not in the future. Your hope is in Jesus, who brings hope for the future. Think about this world. Oh, it's a mess. Yeah, it's a mess. But someday Jesus returns. And when he returns, he cleans it up. And he brings hope with him once again. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. We sing the songs, but so often we fail to actually put our hope in him. And instead we say, well, if we just get the right president, it'll be fine. No, we get Jesus right, it'll be fine. Well, if we just get the right mayor, it'll be fine. If we just get my coffee right, I'll be okay. Jesus is the one who brings us hope. And now, I know it's easy to think right now, yeah, that's easy to say because you're reading the Bible. Those are all old people. They lived forever ago. It's just a book. I don't know what I believe about all that. And we can question this. But there's a lady named Corrie ten Boom. Corrie ten Boom said this: heaven has no panic, only plans. And Corrie ten Boom is not only the owner of probably the coolest name in history, she also is a lady that I think everyone should get to know. So Corrie ten Boom was a Dutch Reformed Christian living in the Netherlands, and she was part of a group of people who would hide Jewish people who were escaping Nazis. And the Nazis were actively hunting Jewish people down, and they would put them in these concentration camps. And if you got caught helping them, you would also go to the concentration camp. She was a young person, and she was hiding people in her room. She had built a small place in her room that she was hiding people. One day she had 6 people hiding in this place, and she had about 30 friends and family in her house, and they were all praying together, having a prayer meeting, when the Nazi SS soldiers burst into her house and looked for the Jewish people, and they could not find them. But what a lot of us don't understand historically is that if you were a Christian at this point, you also were someone that the Nazis did not like anyways. And so because they were hiding and because they were not helping them and because they were opposed to what the Nazis believed, they arrested her, her father, and her sister. 10 days later, in a concentration camp, her dad died. She was able to stay with her sister, and they began to be moved from concentration camp to concentration camp to concentration camp. Finally, they arrived at a place called Ravensbrück. Ravensbrück is known as one of the worst concentration camps that there was. And her sister, obviously facing a lot of torture from guards, facing a lot of brutalities from guards, facing a lot of abuse from guards, looked for signs of hope in the worst concentration camp in the Nazi regime. It was called Ravensbrück, and it was ironic because ravens fed Elijah by a brook. And so they said, well, if God had hope for Elijah, he'll have hope for us here. And one of the things, think about that, like let this sink into you. One of the things that gave them hope was that there was so many lice and fleas in the room that they were concentrated in that the guards would not come in and search for their Bible or harass them. And so they said, God, thank you for the fleas and the lice. They give us signs of hope to come. Her sister had told her that, then passed away, and Corrie ten Boom was the only one left. And she spent more time in that concentration camp before finally being released. And she said, heaven has no panic, only plans. Now think about that. I lose hope when the Columbus Crew don't win a game. What are we even doing? I lose hope when the person I vote for doesn't get elected or does get elected. I lose hope when my friends have problems. I lose hope when I get devastating news. Here's a lady sitting in a concentration camp in the worst place in the world with some of the worst people in the world, thanking God for fleas, because now she can keep a page of her Bible and read it in a prison camp. Her hope was in Jesus, not in her present situation. If your hope is in your past, you lose it when you get stuck in a present situation that's not as good as your past. If your hope is in your present and it's not going well presently, you lose hope. If your hope is in your future but you can't see outside of prison walls, you lose hope. But she said, heaven has no panic, only plans. She wrote a book called The Hiding Place. It is one of the best books you will ever read. Regardless of your age, regardless of anything else, it is an incredible book. So how did her and David live a hopeful life in a hopeless time? I think there's some things we can do. We can recognize something. We can recognize where you are headed, Think about this for a second. John used to play football for Westerville South. He was just an absolute machine, best football player, not named Jason Williams, that there was known to history, right? John, no one tackles you if you're running the wrong way. Maybe your teammates might. But if you pick up the ball and start running the wrong direction, you face no opposition. Why? Because the opposing team's like, please, go ahead, please. I played basketball and soccer. No one in soccer tried to stop me if I kicked it at my own goal. No one in basketball tried to stop me. I had a friend one time on a free throw. He jumped up in the air, got the free throw, but got bumped and turned around and was facing the rim far, far away. And out of reflex, just automatically went back up and shot it towards the rim that was like 50 feet away. No one tried to block him. Why? Because they don't care if you're going the wrong way. If you face difficulty, if you face opposition, it is a sign you are headed in the right direction. When your marriage faces opposition, it's a sign you're headed in the right direction. When your faith faces opposition, it's a sign you're headed in the right direction. When your life faces severe opposition after opposition after opposition, the enemy's trying to stop you. Why? Because you're going in the right direction. So recognize where you're headed. No one tries to stop the person going the wrong way in a football game. Charlie and James play football. I got to watch them play a game. They're machines. Like Charlie, these guys are beasts down here. We played a game of dunk ball at the youth revival thing in last year in St. Louis. No one tried to stop Charlie if he was trying to dunk on his own rim, because who cares? Go ahead. But the moment you start facing into the opposition, you will have opposition. The moment you begin to head the right direction in life, it's almost how you know you're headed the right direction. Is there opposition from the enemy? So recognize where you're headed. Number 2, recognize where you've been. Recognize where you've been. You've come a long way. You may not realize it, but you've come a long way from back where you were when you began. Christianity is this thing that's really hard to realize, like how far you've come. But you ever watch yourself on video from back in the day and you're like, oh, okay. You've come a long way. Yeah, you struggle. But you just keep going. Keep going. Recognize where you've been. David is sitting and he's fleeing from Absalom, and he's got to realize, man, I've been here before. I'm going to be okay. God got me through this. And it wasn't just my son. It was a whole entire army. God got me through that. He'll get me through this. If God had you in the past, he'll have you in the present. If God was with you back then, he'll be with you right now. If God was with you when you were single, he'll be with you when you're married. If God was with you when you were renting, he'll be with you when you own a house. If God was with you when you were young, he'll be with you when you're old. So recognize where you've been. Next, recognize who's with you. Recognize who's with you. David said something. He said, magnify the Lord. Let us exalt his name together. Now, often we can think of magnifying as a little bit different way. But what the idea of magnifying is changing your perception so that you realize how big something is. And so often we need to be people who magnify. We realize how big our God is. We recognize how big God is. And when we recognize how big God is, we realize how small our problems are compared to him. He is the ever triumphant God. When you pray, I think we say it wrong as Christians. When you pray, God doesn't go to bat for you. He doesn't go to war for you. Your problems, when you involve God, are so minuscule compared to him that he steps right over them. Look at John 6, verse 16. It's appropriate that it's raining as we read this. John 6:16, when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into a boat, and started across the sea to Capernaum. It was now dark, and Jesus had not come to them yet. The sea became rough because a strong wind was blowing. When they had rowed 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea and coming near the boat. They were frightened. He said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." They were glad to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. That wave, that storm that is just blocking you from seeing God, God steps right over it when you involve him. When your hope is in God, your hope is in the one who created a universe by speaking it. When your hope is in God, your hope is in the person who fed 5,000 with 2 fishes and some bread. When your hope is in God, your hope is in the one who healed lepers. When your hope is in God, your hope is in the one who raised Lazarus. When your hope is in God, your hope is in the one who brought people across the sea. When your hope is in God, it is in someone that is so much bigger than your problems. When your hope is in God, giants fall and they seem minuscule compared to him. So that all you have to do is involve him and throw a little rock and he solves it before you even let go. God is above your current situation. Hope in him. So I knew the teenagers would be in here, so I did my best to think of sports things because I know our boys like to play sports. So back in the day, I had a basketball player that I was a big fan of. His name was Allen Iverson. Anybody remember Allen Iverson? Oh, all right, good. There was also another team. He was for the Philadelphia 76ers. There was another team called the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Los Angeles Lakers had Kobe Bryant and Shaq. And they were in the finals against the Philadelphia 76ers. And so basically, it was the Los Angeles Lakers versus Allen Iverson because he was alone. And if you know anything about Allen Iverson, he's like maybe 6'1". He weighed like 155 pounds. He was very small, and he was incredibly good at basketball. So here you have Allen Iverson facing off against 7'3" Shaq. And Kobe Bryant, haters are going to say he's not, but he's the greatest player of our generation. But there's another guy on the court named Tyronn Lue. Tyronn Lue thought the game was about him and Allen Iverson. So Tyronn Lue got in his ear and he did exactly what the devil does to you. He just starts chatting. And he starts making, all these things, just start bringing up all these things, telling you all about your past, telling you all about your failures, telling you all about your problems, telling you how big your problem is. Tyronn Lue got in Allen Iverson's ear, and he just kept running his mouth. And Allen Iverson crossed him over, knocked him down, hit a three in his face, and then stepped over top of him and kept walking. You know what he was saying? This ain't about you. This ain't about you. You're not even a problem to me. I got to deal with Shaq and Kobe. You are just someone I walk over on the way to them. Do you know the problems you face, God steps right over them. The job loss, God steps right over it. The finances, God steps right over it. Someone was telling me recently, they said, if you made $100,000 in 2013, it's like making $40,000 in 2023. That's a problem. But God steps right over it. If he fed Elijah by a river using a raven, he's going to take care of you. If he made a way through a wilderness, he's going to take care of you. If he fed 5,000, he's going to take care of you. If he could get David away from Saul and from Absalom, he's going to be able to take care of you. Our hope is in him, so involve him. Bring him into the past. Oh, you don't know, I was abused. Bring God into that abuse. God, I need to talk to you about this. God, you don't know how bad my past was. Bring him into your painful past. I need to talk to you about this. Bring him into your present situation. Bring him into your future. He steps over the things that seem impossible to the rest of us. Our hope is in him. I rewrote Psalm 65, not in like a translation, but in the way I would read it, to say this: if you can move a mountain, you can move a man. If you can calm an ocean, then you can calm my anxiety. If you can make the sun to rise, you can help me get up when I get knocked down. If you can bring the rain into a desert, you can bring the rain in my soul. If you can provide for David, you can provide for me. If you can grow a garden, then you can grow me into who you want me to be. If you can make a way through a sea, you can make a way for me. If you can walk on water, you can walk with me when I am in a storm. If you can dress the lilies with beauty and splendor, how much more will you clothe me? If you can watch over every sparrow, how much more do you love me? You will lose sight of hope if your hope is in the past. You will lose sight of hope if your hope is in the present. You will lose sight of hope if your hope is in the future. But if you bring Jesus in and you place your hope in him, he gives you hope for your past, for your present, and for your future. And if he's done it for David, he can do it for you. If he's done it for his disciples, he can do it for you. If he's done it for the people in the Bible, he can do it for you. If he was with you back then, he's with you right now. And if God is with you, God is for you. And if God is for you, that problem that seems so big is something that you can just step right over. Our hope is built on Jesus Christ. He is our cornerstone. I'm going to ask the worship team to come up here. I'm going to ask you all to stand to your feet. The idea of the cornerstone is really interesting. The cornerstone is really fascinating. What they used to do in the old times before we had, the ability to make concrete and pour it and do all those things is they would find the most sturdy stone they could possibly find, get it in the right spot, and hinge the entire future of the entire building upon that stone that they built everything else on. Jesus Christ is called our cornerstone. He's not something we add into our life when things go bad. He is our life, and when things go bad, we can rest on him. We can know that our foundation is secure. This is why Jesus told this story about this man. He built a house on a rock, and the rains came, and the floods came, and it stood firm. And he tells it about another person who built a house on sand. The rains came, the floods came, and it fell. Why? If your hope is in your housing situation, you're going to lose hope. If your hope is in a person, we say it so flippantly. Well, you rescued me. You saved me. I didn't know anything about love. I didn't know anything about life until I met you. Well, if I just find that person, I'll be okay. There is a person named Jesus Christ who came to this earth to find you. And all those people who swiped one way on the dating apps, they're not going to rescue you. They're not going to bring you hope. Even the ones who say yes can't bring you the hope that Jesus Christ can. Our hope is built only on him. We live a hopeful life. We live an impactful life when our hope is built on Jesus Christ. So on your worship guides, there is a prayer if you're not comfortable praying together with other people. This is something that we've begun to do recently. We give you the opportunity to pray together, to gather with people you love, to gather with people you know, and just pray. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions before we do. Is your hope in the past? Is your hope in the present? Is it in the future? Or is your hope in Jesus Christ? That's question one. Question two. What problem is staring you in the face right now? And it's so big that during this sermon, you had a hard time thinking about anything other than the problem. And every now and then when there all of a sudden became a picture of Allen Iverson, you snap back to what we were talking about. But the problem is overwhelming to you. What is that problem? Give it to Jesus. Hand it to him. God, I am inviting you into my problem, into my pain, into my past, into my present, and into my future. There's no better hope than the hope that is found in Jesus Christ, the one who saves us. I do know that when my hope is in him, even when times are bad, we have a bright future. We have a God who's given us eternity with him. Eternity with him. The one who the Bible says there's no need of light in his presence because he is so bright that he lights everything around him. The one who the angels full of eyes without and within, the ones looking at him and looking within to make sure that what they're saying is the truth, can say nothing about him besides that he is holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. If your hope for your salvation, if your hope for the afterlife is in yourself doing enough good to achieve that, then you're going to kind of live a hopeless life. But if your hope is in Jesus, the one who created everything to rescue you and save you, the one who said, I will in no wise ever cast anyone out who comes to me, the one who said that when you get saved, he places you in his hands and the Father places his hands over them. The one who says he writes your name in the book of life and no man can take it out. When your hope is in him, your salvation is secure. And our hope is built on that. So in just a minute, I'm going to ask you to pray with each other. Find someone near you, pray with them, get to know each other. We'll give you a couple minutes to do that. If you don't know anybody, you're like, I don't want to, I'll come down front and pray with you. But I'm going to encourage you right now to turn to someone. As soon as I finish praying, find someone near you and pray with them. Spend a couple minutes, then these guys will worship. We'll come back and worship together. Heavenly